I said, if you can't hear me. Welcome everybody to the first town hall in Ventura County, being hosted by our very own Congresswoman Dowling. Julia was elected in 2012. She had 7 years of improving the lives of all of us. I don't know about the rest of your experience, but one of the pleasures I've had around town is I'm sort of the number one pedestrian. I hope nobody runs over me, but occasionally when I'm out doing that, guess who I run into? We went for a nice long walk before one of the events. The Congresswoman serves on the Veterans Affairs Committee, looking out for our veterans and their families to see that they get the kind of care that they deserve. Also the transportation infrastructure, something else that could use a lot of. We're still waiting on the Pres and then I guess the Senate. So anyway, Julia has done a wonderful job for the citizens of the county, and we're honored to have the first town hall meeting here in Ojai. So Julia, before I leave you all, if you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You see that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the introduction and appreciate you being here and all the good work you do for the city of Ojai. I think when I first met you, you were the city manager in Ventura. Ventura County, exactly. So anyway, I'm just delighted to see all of you here and to be here with all of you today. And I must say, I was speaking to the sheriff at the back of the room, and it's very, very nice to be here for a community meeting in better times, I will say, because I attended many community meetings about 11 months ago when Ojai was being completely threatened by ravaging fires, the Thomas fires, which was a very, very scary time, really, for all of us. And it's amazing to me that that was really just 11 months ago. 2 years ago. 2 years ago. No, I know. That's what I was meant to say. It seems like it's 11 months, but it's 2 years ago. But that was a very, very scary time. And just this last year, Ventura County has faced a lot of tragedies in some sense, and that just last Thursday, we had the first year anniversary of the Borderline shooting that happened in Thousand Oaks, followed by the Woolsey fire. So we've had our share of fires and we've had our share of scares so far this season. So, but it is amazing to me how resilient the communities really throughout Ventura County, and particularly here in Ojai, are. It's an amazing community. When I think of community broken down as common unity. And I think certainly with the devastation of the fires that we have had over the last 2 years, and still the Thomas fire still being, at the time that it happened, was the largest fire in California's history. It's now the second largest fire in California's history. But, you know, I'm not proud to say that we're the second largest fire in California's history, but it is, when you think about it, to know how many acres were burned and how many homes and other things were destroyed, and the fact that we really only lost, I think, one life. We lost one firefighter, was a pretty amazing feat, and we owe our great gratitude to all of the first responders, both to the Ventura County Sheriff's, but really in the face of despair, to watch communities really across Ventura County who have experienced this has been really, really overwhelming. And I must say, when I'm back in Washington, I'm bragging all of the time, because anybody that has seen me back in Washington over the last 2 years knows that we've faced a lot of big fires in California, and in both cases, both the Thomas Fire and the Woolsey Fire, I left Washington, D.C. when it was in session to be here, and to be here with you. And so, again, it's wonderful to be here. This is, the mayor said, this is the first town hall I've had here in Ojai, and I told my staff that I wanted to have some town hall meetings throughout the county, having never had one here. I've had a couple of town halls since I've been elected to Congress, but I've never had one here, and so I wanted to have the first one in the series anyway, to be right here in Ojai. So I don't want to talk a whole lot, because I really want to hear from all of you and what's on your mind. But I will say, as a nation, we have faced turbulent times here locally, but certainly as a nation we are facing turbulent times, and we're hearing about it every single day on the news. And you know, as Thomas Paine said, I like to quote him, as Thomas Paine said, in the very depths, the deepest, darkest days of the Revolutionary War, he said, the time has found us. And in some sense, I think in terms of what's happening now in our country, the times have really found us. And we're in turbulent times, and we're in times when our democracy and the basic pillars of a republic, the basic pillars of our democracy, are really being threatened. And we can talk about what's happening in Washington around that issue. But before I hand the mics over to you in terms of what's on your mind and what you would like to know, and of course I want to know what is on your mind so I can better represent you back in Washington. But I want you to know, even though when you turn on the news every single day, the only thing you hear is about one topic, and one topic alone. But I want you to know that there is a lot going on in Washington, and I will tell you, it's a tremendous honor to represent you back in Washington, and it's a tremendous honor to finally be in the majority back in Washington, because I think many, many times, thank God, we have the majority in the House, because we have one backstop in terms of everything else that's going on in Washington. I can't imagine what it would be like if we didn't have that backstop. But there's a lot going on with regards to policy, and we have a lot of challenging issues in our country where we need to move forward with strong policy to move our country forward. But I want to assure you that we've been very, very busy, and I'm going to put my glasses on because I just want to read this particular list of the amount of bills that we have put forward. On the floor of the House of Representatives. And while almost every single one of these bills are not seeing the light of day in the Senate, sadly, we are building I think a very, very strong blueprint for what all of the possibilities are for 2020, which we're not too far away from. But let me just read off a list of these. We've done 10 bills to protect and expand access to affordable health care and lower prescription drugs. We passed H.R. 1, which is For the People Act, that includes all kinds of reforms to clean up Washington, but also around election reform. Two of my bills actually got included into H.R. 1, which is one, same-day voting, which we have here in California, but it would be nice if the whole nation had same-day voting. And also redistricting, what we did here in California, giving the power to the people in order to draw the various lines, whether they're congressional lines or state legislature lines. And certainly I can tell you, when we did that in California, we expanded the number of Democratic seats in Congress. And if we did that across the country, there is no doubt in my mind that we would expand Democratic seats in Congress. When Hillary Clinton wins by 3 million votes and Donald Trump is sworn in as president, you know that there's something going on with gerrymandering of districts across the country. So there's a whole host of issues. A whole host of issues in H.R. 1. There's the Equality Act, which is, the Equality Act is such an important piece of legislation that we have finally moved forward. And this is around our LGBTQ community. Can you imagine here in California, we're in pretty good shape. But if you're an LGBTQ member of society and traveling across the country, it can be a very scary way to travel because your rights and your liberties aren't the same in other places. So an extremely important bill. The American Dream and Promise Act, the Paycheck Fairness Act. We passed a background check in terms of gun safety. And that was actually a bipartisan bill. We passed the Climate Action Now Act, which was reaffirming the United States' place with regards to the Paris Agreement. We passed the Raise the Wage Act to raise the minimum wage to $15. Securing America's Federal Elections Act, the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, Veterans Access to Child Care, which is my bill that's passed on the House floor. We have passed 3 bills to block oil and gas drilling in coastal communities. There is a lot going on, and as the mayor said, I sit on a couple of different committees in Washington, the Veteran Affairs Committee, of which I now chair, the Health Committee, the subcommittee with veterans, so that means I am responsible for the healthcare delivery for all of our veterans throughout the country. I am a member of the Transportation Committee, and we are working very, very hard on a transportation and infrastructure bill, which is going to come to the floor here pretty shortly. The need for infrastructure throughout our country is intense, and certainly all of you know with the experiences we've had with the fire and the devastation of the fire, there is so much more that we need to do in terms of pre-disaster mitigation and other kinds of things. So infrastructure is going to be extremely, extremely important. We're also working on a big prescription drug bill to finally really take a deep stab at lowering the cost of prescription drugs throughout our country. I'm also have had the opportunity to, this is going now back to veterans for a minute, but I have the opportunity to lead a Women's Veterans Task Force. There are 2 million women veterans in our country, and when women serve in the military, they are obviously a very, very visible population when they are serving in the military. When they leave the military and come home, they're very invisible. And we have not treated women veterans, in my opinion, properly and equally as we have our male veterans. So I've gone across the country to talk to women veterans. They have come to me in Washington. We've had lots of hearings and roundtables. And through all of those conversations, we have determined where a lot of the inequities lie with regards to our women veterans. And we've put together a bill, whether we're calling it the Deborah Sampson bill. And this bill passed out of the Veteran Affairs Committee last week and will be on the House floor this week. And the Deborah Sampson bill is a very comprehensive bill. Deborah Sampson was a woman who fought in the Revolutionary War. She disguised herself as a man. She served and fought in the Revolutionary War, got a gash in her head from a sword, a bullet in her thigh, in her upper thigh. And after 17 months of serving, she retired and left the military. At that time, really, the only benefit a veteran would receive is their pension. But she left the military and had no pension. All the males had a pension. So over the next 2 decades, she then spent her time advocating across the country and to Congress to say women should also have the benefit. And she died, but shortly thereafter, after she died, the pension was received and it went to her husband. So it's appropriately called the Deborah Sampson Bill to celebrate women who serve in our country and also to make sure that they have the same the rights and privileges and benefits that our male veterans have. So, and the last thing I want to let you know, I want to let you know is I'm on the speaker put me on a special committee, and it's the select committee on the climate crisis. And it's a temporary committee. It will never be a permanent standing committee, but our charge by the speaker is to put forward bold legislation to address the climate crisis. And we've been working really, really hard, and actually many committees in Washington have been working very, very hard on this issue. And I know the House has held over 80 hearings on the climate crisis. And our intent is to put together very bold legislation to address the crisis, to follow really, quite frankly, California's lead to get to a net zero carbon emission by 2050, to get to a clean energy point by 2045, which would be 100% renewables. We've got to look at some carbon mechanism, whether it's a carbon fee or a cap and trade like California has, to incentivize all of this moving forward. We need to do a tremendous amount of research in battery storage and other kinds of things. We need to pull down the barriers of our grid across the country so that we can electrify our whole transportation industry across the country, and that's from cars to rails to bus to light-duty trucks, heavy-duty trucks, and down the road. But we need to have an infrastructure and a grid that can handle all of that. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and as I said, we've had many meetings, and we're looking at every single industry in terms of what we can be doing to address the climate crisis. And I say everywhere that I go, any policy that we make in Washington, sometimes we think we're making good policy, but it turns out to be not so good policy for unintended consequences. And when that happens, we can fix it. But the one thing we cannot fix, if we don't do something about it, and we don't do something about it now, is our climate. And we're about 2 decades behind, and there is a lot of work that we have to do. So we will put that forward, and that will also probably end up in the collection of bills that will mark the blueprint for 2020. I think there'll be some things that we can do, but the big issues that we really need to address and the big goals that we need to put forward, I think will probably take 2020 to make all of those things happen. But it's going to be critical that we do, and the United States has to really reaffirm itself as a global leader when it comes to our planet and saving our planet for our children's generation and their children. questions and hear what your concerns are, so I can take that back with me to Washington to try to do a better job of representing all of you. But thank you for giving me the honor to serve you in Congress, to serve our country. I feel it is a great, great privilege and a great honor, and I'm very grateful to each and every one of you. So thank you.
Okay, so the way we're going to do questions is that we have about 3 questions here first, and then we'll give the congressman the opportunity to respond to them. Then what we will do is, if you have a question, if you could raise your hand, and then we, the staff, Nina and I, will go alternate back and forth from left to right of the room, and then try to get as many. Forewarning, we're not going to get to everyone's questions today, but if at the end you can just give us your questions, and we'll make sure to share them with the Congresswoman. So
yeah, and I think these 2 questions, Karina, were picked because there were several questions in that.
yes, around these.
In that subject area.
Yes. So the first one is from Mr. William Wilds, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran from Ojai, and he says, thank you for your dedication to veterans. What's coming up in Oxnard and Ventura?
What do you mean, what's coming up?
I'm pretty sure.
Who's the gentleman?
Mr. Wilds, yes.
Thank you, and thank you for your service, let me say, first and foremost. Yes.
I'm just curious, being in the VA healthcare system.
Yes.
That's specifically what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I understand there's some things happening.
Yes, there are some things
In the
happening.
immediate future.
Understood,
Yeah.
understood.
Okay,
So,
good.
when I first got to Washington, D.C., there's a clinic in Oxnard for our veterans. And once I started to look at the data and look at comparative data in terms of what other communities have and the amount of veterans that are in their community and the amount of veterans that they are serving, I realized very, very quickly that we were so far underserved in this county when it came to our veterans. And so we've been working on this issue ever since. And the clinic in Oxnard has grown. It's gone through 2 growing cycles. It's now larger, with a larger team of doctors, with some specialty care coming into the clinic. And we finally got the dollars in Washington to build a brand new, what is it, 41,000 square foot facility. It will be sited in Ventura. The VA wants to make sure that it's as central to all of the veterans in Ventura County, but a brand new facility which will be run by the VA. Our current clinic in Oxnard is contracted out, so sometimes our veterans go in there and they don't really know what's going on with the VA and can't answer all of their questions, so it will be run by the VA. We'll have more primary care teams, and we'll bring in a lot of specialty care into that district. My goal and my 10-year vision for veterans in Ventura County is that the exception to the rule will be you have to go to Sepulveda or to the West LA facility to receive your health care. That you will, in most cases, be able to receive your health care here in the county, either through the clinic or through the Mission Act, using our community healthcare partners within the community. That's my 10-year vision. That's what we're working towards. But this clinic is going to make a big, big difference. So I appreciate you asking the question.
The next question is Mr. Altman. Are you going to support Lower Drug Costs Now Act 2019, HR 3?
HR 3, absolutely. And the HR 3 is being marked up right now as we speak, and should be coming to the floor either this coming week or the following week. I'm not exactly sure, but it is a very high priority for the Democratic caucus in Congress. This is something, when we all campaigned in 2018, we had a For the People agenda, and one of the big component pieces was driving healthcare costs down and making healthcare costs more affordable. And one of the big component pieces to that are the cost of prescription drugs. And as I travel through the county, I hear from families, I hear from seniors who are actually not filling their prescriptions because of the cost involved. I hear people splitting pills and not taking the full dose of their prescriptions because of the affordability. It's just gotten way, way, way out of control in terms of what's happening with the cost of prescription drugs. So what HR 3 will do is it will allow Medicare to negotiate prices on prescription drugs, not simply for Medicare patients, but for all patients across the country. But Medicare would be negotiating those drugs. So those drugs that are, and they're going to do this over a period of time. So they'll take 30 or 40 of the most expensive drugs and begin that negotiation. And what they're going to be looking at in that negotiation is they're looking at 7 other countries in the country, Germany, France, etc. People who, who have high quality health care, and looking at what the drug prices are there, and try to use that as a benchmark to try to drive down these prices. So it's a long, complex bill, but overall, it is a bill to really drive down prices, and for Medicare users, it would
Just talk too long.
Pardon me?
You talk too long and it makes no sense. All drugs, those drugs are already, President Trump's already taken care of that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It will also...
We have questions here. If you keep talking so long, we're not going to be able to have time to have questions.
Yes, sir. We'll get to your question, sir.
We'll try to make it short.
Stop interrupting.
Pardon me?
Stop interrupting so she can speak.
I'm just asking.
You're making it last long.
I came here to make questions.
That's correct. We all want to be respectful of different opinions, and the gentleman in the back we're going to hear from him, and I will end by just saying the last thing that I wanted to point out on HR 3 is that it will cap the out-of-pocket costs on Medicare. That too has gotten somewhat out of control. So with that, shorten my answer. Why don't we just get the gentleman in the back?
Yeah, thank you. Go for it. Go for it. Thank you so much.
One question.
I appreciate it. You know that it is irresponsible to blame the Trump administration for the border crisis by refusing to change the asylum laws that make it easy to submit claims without merit. Asylum is provided to those who have been persecuted by another government. It is not for economic migrants or victims of criminal violence. The time for demagoguing in this issue is over. Unless you help reform our asylum laws, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. With a population of about 330 million people in the United States, the world's largest economy, America's ecological footprint already vastly exceeds its biocapacity. Between 2015 and 2065, I will come up to a question. I'll come up to a question. I understand. Just let me talk. I got the right to speak. That's okay. I'm coming up to the question. I know that the Democrats are all talk and no action. The population will grow at about 441 million according to the Pew Research. New immigrants will account for 88% of that increase. If we are to the transition toward a future where the nation operates at sustainable scale, we must reduce today's record immigration levels alongside ambitious ecological footprint reducing efforts. The DREAM Act will grant amnesty to illegal aliens without addressing the cost and the root of the cause. If Congress doesn't stop illegal immigration, mainly by requiring all businesses to use the E-Verify
Sorry.
Illegal immigration will continue, and Congress will be forced to pass future amnesties, and also will oppose granting permanent residency to temporary protected status.
Sir,
I got the right to speak. I got my First Amendment right.
excuse me, sir.
Okay, the question is, what are you doing to change the laws? Instead of just talking nonsense, what are you planning to do to fix the asylum laws and the immigration laws to stop all this invasion to our country?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And again, I want to respect, differing viewpoints here. And this should be a respectful gathering. And I respect your opinion. My opinion differs from yours. And I'm hoping that you'll. So, and I think there are two issues here. One is the asylum issue, and one is immigration. There are two separate issues. And in terms of asylum and people coming to our borders to seek asylum are coming from very, very dangerous the Triangle countries in Central America for very dangerous reasons. Women are bringing their sons and daughters and trying to put them across the border, knowing that this is making that horrible Sophie's choice, that this might be the only thing that saves their children. So I believe our asylum rules need to be followed. In my opinion, they are not being followed at the moment. I've been to the border in both McAllen, Texas and El Paso, Texas. I've seen firsthand what is going on at the border. In terms of immigration, we need a comprehensive immigration bill so that 11 million people who are living in our country in the shadows, who are working, who are paying taxes, who are productive citizens, can come to our country, can come and work, and have a pathway to citizenship. Have strict border. First, we have to have the comprehensive immigration reform, and then we have to really control who's coming over our borders and have border security. And I think border security can be done less with a wall and more with technology once we get to that place. But for the people who are coming to seek asylum, we need to follow our laws. And currently, we are not following the laws, and there are draconian policies at the moment that are pushing almost all of these people who are seeking asylum. They're pushing them back into Mexico. They take a number, they wait for their asylum hearing to see if there is an establishment of credible fear. And once that happens, I read in the LA Times yesterday, I can't confirm this, but this is what I read in the LA Times yesterday, is the courts are then giving them another bogus court date to say, now you need to return back, in El Paso's case, to Juarez. You need to return back to Juarez and we'll call your number later. The reason they're doing that is because Mexico, the country of Mexico, only promised to house and take care of those people coming to seek asylum that are in the system, in our system, trying to seek that asylum.
So you agree our immigration is broken?
Our immigration system is broken and it needs to be fixed. And sadly, when I first was elected to Congress, we had a comprehensive immigration bill that passed on a bipartisan basis out of the Senate, came to the House. At that particular time, the Republicans were in the majority in the House. John Boehner was the Speaker of the House at the time, and John Boehner would not put that bill on the floor for us to vote on. If he had, it would have passed in a bipartisan way. It would have gone to Obama's desk, and Obama would have signed it, and we would not have the immigration issues that we're dealing with dealing with today. So I understand your perspective, and as I said, I respect your opinion. I hope that you respect mine, and any other ideas or feelings that you have, I am still open to hearing them. So, thank you.
Here's our next question.
Jeffrey Starkweather, Vice President of the Ohio Democratic Club. I appreciate what you're doing on climate change. My question is whether you are seriously considering the approach of the Green New Deal, which is different than cap and trade, different than the carbon tax, which have been found to be problematic and take a long time. The Green New Deal is more like the Regional New Deal, which is an investment strategy, transition, and it seems like it is the size that meets the crisis. So, and most of our local officials have supported the Green New Deal in this
Is that what
area.
this is saying that's causing all these problems?
Please don't interrupt. Let her answer.
Wait. One question at a time. So, thank you for the question. So, I think the Green New Deal is a very good blueprint in terms of us moving forward and addressing this climate crisis. And I think whether we return resources, return resources back to people is one method of doing it. The carbon tax and other things are issues that I think that we have to wrestle with one way or the other. Cap and trade in California, in my opinion, has been successful. If it's not, I want to hear more about it because it's been a while since I've been in the state legislature. But the state of California now has got a big bucket of money to invest back into getting to a much cleaner environment.
A lot of us feel that California is not making much success in stopping taking carbon fossil fuels out of the environment. We particularly have a problem here in Ventura County with extraction and so forth.
Well, with fracking and
that seems to be not working in terms of dramatically reducing the amount of fossil fuel.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying is that, California now has a bill that says we have to get to by 2045, every energy source needs to be a clean energy source. And wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. And I think that's the direction.
Gotta be 10 or 11 years, that's too long.
I understand, but right now we're not doing anything. So, that's where California is. California is leading the country. There are a lot of experts that will say, a couple of weeks ago I went, if anybody's ever heard of the Aspen Institute, I went on a 2-day gig with the Aspen Institute to talk about global energy policy, and all of the experts around the table all said, for us to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, we can do everything we know we can do today in terms of what is out there, but that still won't get us there. What's going to finally get us over the finish line is going to be something that we don't know about yet in terms of new technologies and other kinds of things. So, even in Switzerland, they have this machine that sucks the carbon out of the air. But they all said, and for us to get there, and that's even including looking at not nuclear energy the way we know it. I've always been against nuclear energy, but there's new technology within nuclear energy that's.
How many people are not it's not like we have a big market. Because they don't make as much sense.
Well, sodium reactors, Santa Susana had a partial sodium nuclear meltdown.
I know what happens, and it's not the fault of the design.
Okay, well, we can talk, because I've worked on this issue since for over a decade, just because I was in the state legislature, you know, and dealt with it for 6 years, and then certainly in Congress. But I would like to hear, certainly like to hear more about it. But the gentleman who asked the question, I appreciate the question, and the Select Committee in Congress, we are open right now to any ideas that people have, and we're looking for very specific policy solutions. We're not looking for, we need to get to net zero by whatever it is, but we're looking at very specific policy suggestions and solutions. So I can give you that information too. Well, a lot of this it's going to be a market-based solution. In terms of talking to energy companies across the country, I can tell you that there are a lot of companies out there, a lot of utility companies out there who are already moving towards their energy portfolio is changing and changing in a pretty specific way with more and more renewables from their utilities. They want to make the capital investments to get further than that, but they also want a level playing field. So they're willing to make the capital investments themselves as long as they know that all of their competitors are going to be doing the same thing and have to contribute to these goals that we set.
I'm sorry. I understand that. Okay.
But everybody has one question, and
we need to go back and forth. So just to keep this, I'm sorry, folks. I know that all questions are not going to be answered, but please be patient with
But you're not
us.
controlling the meeting. You should have been over here and go picked on someone.
So Dina is Dina is actually right next to you. Next to her, take the next question.
Please.
So we're actually going to have this woman right here ask the question.
Hello, I'd like to know what your priorities are for education, particularly for our local community colleges.
Thank you for that question. I want to get to a free community college.
Yeah.
In the state legislature, I chaired the education committee. I chaired the K through 12 committee, and then I also sat on the higher education committee covering California's community colleges, our state universities, and our UC system. And I also sat on the education budget committee that oversaw both K through 12 and higher education. So I'm a former recovering school board member for 12 years. So education is very near and dear to my heart, and we have to invest a lot more across the board in our educational systems. And we really need to start very, very young so that everybody gets an equal start in school when they enter in pre-K or K, whatever it is. But our community colleges, we have to go back to what its origination was so that everybody in the community can go if that's their choice, both for their kind of first higher education experience or to retool themselves in a secondary spot. And so we've just got to get to that place, and we cannot, the student debt in our country is larger than our credit card debt in our country, and that's just dead wrong. And so we really do need to address it.
Just a quick question on the homeless situation. As a mandated child abuse disorder, this has been a concern to me over the last year. I've seen quite a few parents panhandling with their children.
I'm sorry, so you're a what?
I'm a mandated child abuse disorder. And I've seen parents with their children panhandling for money in places where it's very dangerous. Parking lots, medians, and the police, I talked to the police department, they said for me to stir up the dust because they can't do anything about that either. And I feel like I have to walk away from a baby whose mother is asking for money, and to me that's exploitation of a child. And I don't understand why CPS does not see that.
then help the parents.
No,
I can be loud too.
Yeah, no,
People that get to ask
I mean,
questions are the loud
I
ones.
hear your concern, and I hear your frustration, and Sharon, this is much more of a local issue and a state, and a state issue. I mean, the federal government can do something about homelessness, and can be a partner to the state of California and to our local agencies. And we need to be doing a lot more in terms of affordable housing, particularly affordable housing for families. And a lot more wraparound services for these people who are on the street. I share your concern. I trust your observations. I'm not doubting that for a second. I'm just saying that that's something that has to really be addressed more on a local level and at the state level.
Congresswoman, I'm sorry, we're going to insist that we only respond to people who have raised their hands and we give the mics to. It's not fair otherwise, okay? Thank you so much, I appreciate it. Okay, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
So, we have a mic here.
Hi, are we going to see an extension of the solar investment tax credit before it begins phasing down January 1, and/or an investment tax credit for energy storage?
This is what we call, back in Washington, tax extenders, which we're due to address. In some cases, we're overdue. And so my hope is, and we are, the Senate and the House are in conference right now to work through all of those things, including child care tax credit. You know, the list goes. There's a lot of them. But my hope is yes and yes, both for solar and both for energy storage. And energy storage would be, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that would be a new tax credit. Yeah, okay. So hopefully yes and yes.
Hello, Congresswoman.
Hello.
I'm a family physician and a palliative care physician, and my question is going to be on health care access. 56% of physicians in this country now support a single-payer health insurance system. And I know you have not yet co-sponsored HR 1384, the Improved Medicare for All bill. Of all the health care plans that are being presented by the 2020 Democratic contenders, with whom do you, or with who, not with whom, but with whose plan do you most align yourself? Which plan towards what I hope to be a single-payer system of health insurance in this country, to whose plan do you align yourself and why?
I'm not sure I'm completely up to date on all of the plans and who owns what. But let me just tell you that Medicare for All, I support the concept of Medicare for All. I believe that our health care is not a privilege, and should not be, and everyone needs access to high-quality health care across the board. And so I believe that when people talk about single payer and Medicare for All, people can have a different picture in their minds when they're talking about it. So I believe that the first step Congress needs to take is to have a full dialogue on this, so we as a nation are all talking about the same solutions and kind of sort of speaking out of the same hymnal. I think that is very, very important that we do that in terms of moving forward. So I do have so I am in charge of the healthcare delivery system for veterans, which is basically the closest thing we have in terms of a single payer system, other than Medicare. But it is, I mean, it's a, you know, and it's the largest healthcare delivery system in the country. And it's not perfect, you know, and it's still got a lot of work to do, but we've driven down prescription drug costs and other kinds of things. And so there are a lot of good things to it. The other issue is my labor friends. My labor friends who have worked very, very hard over the years to negotiate a high-quality health care plan, are, adamantly opposed to moving forward in this respect, because they have given up pay increases, they've given up other kinds of benefits and work conditions.
That's a Republican talking point.
So I support Medicare for All and the aspiration to get there. I just believe we're going to have to take some incremental steps in order to get there. And as Lincoln would say, public sentiment is everything, and I know you're saying that 55% of the people are physicians. But we've got to get to a place, I think, where it is, a large preponderance of the people in the country understand the plan that we're talking about and have that support in order to move successfully in that direction. So I'm just a little bit more cautious and pragmatic, but we've got to get to that place where and whatever we call it, whether it's single payer or Medicare for all, I don't really care what it's called, as long as everyone is getting a high quality health care at a very, very reasonable price that doesn't break the family. So I'm committed to working to that goal as hard as we possibly can. But I do believe it is going to take, those incremental steps. And the gentleman that walked out saying it's a Republican talking point, the reality is it's true. And I mean, I work with labor every day, and labor supports me, and I support working families. And so we have to move carefully on it just to make sure. But I applaud Elizabeth Warren and her amplification of this issue. The Blue Judge perspective is a perspective that I think understands the incrementalism that we need to sort of take. So anyway, but that's, I'm somewhere, in those bookends. Yeah.
Over here.
Yep.
We got the microphone.
My Alzheimer's friend.
Yes, I have a purple question.
Yes.
So
you have to get the monitors to
we have 5.8 Americans living with Alzheimer's. They have over 14 million unpaid caregivers. This disease is the 6th leading cause of death in the U.S. and the 3rd leading cause of death in California. It's the only one in the top 10 for which there is no cure, no prevention, and no way to slow its progression. It is costing our country, just in the year 2019, $290 billion, most of that being Medicaid and Medicare. First of all, as someone who's personally affected by this disease in my family, and on behalf of the whole Alzheimer's community, thank you so much for your commitment and being a champion in the fight against Alzheimer's. Secondly, what do you intend to do as a member of Congress to address this public health crisis?
It is a public health crisis, and I just want to tell everyone that this woman works so hard, and she is in Washington, D.C. a lot advocating for this particular issue, and she doesn't talk about it. You've had a lot of airtime, sir, I'm just saying.
You're like the Statue of Liberty over there.
Excuse me, sir.
She's in my face.
It's okay, calm down, calm down, calm down. I promise you we will get to your question. How's that? So, this is an issue that we must wrestle with, and I support any and all legislation that is out there to address it. Most importantly, we have to invest in the research dollars to get to a place where we can attack this pervasive disease that everybody in this room is going to be touched by one way or the other. And we must do that. It is absolutely critically important that we do. And that's one of the things in HR 3 that I forgot to mention, is a lot of the savings that is going to go there is going to move that money back into NIH for more research, which is important. But we have to take this very, very seriously, and we have to own up to the fact that we're going to have to make significant investments in order to achieve this. And I believe as a nation that we can if we do. So, yes.
Thank you for being here. Thank you very much. I have a very short question. Who are your top 5 donors, and who do you support to defeat Donald Trump?
My top 5 donors, I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can follow up with you. But I would imagine, my guess would be there might be some donors right here in Ojai that are right there at the top, and I think that labor is probably right up there. The pro-LGBTQ groups are, I get support from them, I get support from the environmental group. I mean, there's a whole host of people, but I can get that answer to you very specifically. And I was an very early supporter of Kamala Harris. So I'm very with Kamala Harris. So we'll see how she does in Iowa. But I will tell you that there's not one candidate that I don't, well, there might be one candidate. But most of all the Democratic presidential candidates, I think are amazing. And I think we're in a place right now which is, the American people are really trying to decide where they're going in terms of the political spectrum and where we're going. But I'm going to vote for whoever can beat Donald Trump.
Thank you. I'd be remiss in not thanking you, Representative Brownlee, and all your staff for making this town hall possible. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Also, and I'll get to my question, but with Veterans Day coming up and being a Vietnam veteran, I want to thank those veterans and your leadership on fighting for veterans issues and recognizing the women who served alongside me in Vietnam.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your service, sir, and thank you to all of our nation's veterans for your service to our country. And tomorrow is a day of gratefulness and gratitude, not only to you, but as you said, for the families who supported you. So thank you very, very much.
One wonderful thing about living here in Ventura County is the wonderful agriculture industry. And it's being hammered by drought and fires. This climate change issue is going to have a devastating economic impact, I fear, for maybe future generations. Thank you for serving on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. It was mentioned around the Green New Deal. I think that's a nice, approach. However, there's some really concrete things that are already on the table, like HR 763, the energy innovation, and carbon dividend. Is that part of the discussion in the Select Committee about a carbon fee?
Yes,
and
it
then
is.
a rebate back to us to help us move forward on this? Thank you.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, respect your question, respect mine.
Stand up.
Hi, Congressman. Well, I'm here to ask you about a few things. First thing I have to ask you.
My question.
No, follow the same thing. No. First thing you said.
Okay, very good.
And I appreciate a policeman sitting in the back without them redoing it, right? So what I'm saying is this, I know you support the impeachment of the president. How can you support anything without Inspector General Horowitz's report in the FISA abuse scandal? One. And two is, how can you support the impeachment without Durham's investigation that turned into a criminal investigation into the origins of the 2016 election be concluded? You've made your decision in regard to the impeachment without all the
But you're mischaracterizing these.
Question was asked. Let's take away the microphone, please.
No. You do have a right to your opinion without question, but I supported the impeachment inquiry. We have not gotten to a place where there are articles of impeachment to actually...
What crime has he done?
Pardon me?
What crime has he committed?
Next question.
I know, you're the rich guy, you all, you got life privilege.
If we could just settle down and maybe let the congressman answer the question.
Anyone who holds political office and uses that office for his or her own personal gain is corruption. Corruption.
If Joe Biden's elected president of the United States,
you've got your
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
You're done.
I've answered your question. We can talk about it further. I hear that you want to spend the whole next 2 hours talking about this, and we're just not going to do it because everybody else has to. Excuse me. Let's be respectful, please.
Okay.
Fiona Hill. Read her testimony.
Okay. So we're running out of time. We're going to get kicked out of this room soon. So we only have time for 2 more questions. So here you go.
So actually, what I wanted to ask is, at this time of such divisiveness, there was a time when division was something that we talked about really in Washington and not something that we felt so much in our local communities. But as you can see, this is something that we really feel now, even at home. So what are the things that you're doing and that you think we can be doing to start to heal those divides in our communities? Because I think it really restricts us from moving forward, right? During the Thomas Fire, we came together as communities, and we've sort of lost that momentum. And so what are the things that you personally are doing and that you believe we can do to continue that momentum?
Well, that's a really good question that I don't think I have a great answer to, honestly. But I think there are issues as it relates to how we as a nation get our information. And I think if in another perilous time during Watergate, we didn't have the various news channels that had, one isolated opinion over here and the other. That I think helps to divide us as a nation. So that's problematic. I'm not sure how to solve that. I mean, there's First Amendment rights and freedom of speech and all of that. But we're in a new era in some sense, and it's like the Wild West. We're not quite sure how to deal with it, because where do you get that balance of getting good information, just the facts, ma'am, not the opinion, but just the facts, but how do you maintain people's freedom of speech at the same time? So we're wrestling with this, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media stuff. And so I don't really have a good answer yet, except I know it's a problem that we have to really address. But I think we need, right off the bat, I think we need a leader in our country who is going to bring us together. That's that leadership and that persistent leadership about bringing us together as a country. And you know, I was raised a Republican. I grew up in a Republican family. I have a lot of respect for Republicans and their point of view, and I think that when I'm in Washington, there are a lot of Republican members who I can work with and have worked with and will continue to work with. On the VA committee, it's a very bipartisan committee. We work very, very well. We work very, very well together. But then we have a leader right now who is just, he sees his success and continuing to drive that nail to separate us. And that's not who we are, and we need to have leadership not only at the presidential level, but members of Congress across the board. Local leaders and the like, to respect each other and find common ground. And that's one thing Congress was designed to do. The genius of our Constitution was the separation of power, and to respect other opinions, and that policy doesn't happen overnight. That it is about building consistent consensus and moving forward, and that the big substantial things happen through several years of iterations and moving forward towards that goal. And I just think we've gotten to this place where it's my way or the highway, and we've gotten to this place where we're just so polarized. And quite frankly, I know that I'm going to hear perhaps from some people in this room, but I believe that the Republican Party has to go and redefine themselves. There's so many Republicans that I work with in Congress who will tell me privately that they have no respect for this man in the White House, but it seems to be the Trump party right now. And I think I just hope in 2020, 2018, I said 2018 was the most important election in the history of our country. Well, I'm taking that back now, because it was then, I was telling the truth then, but now it's 2020 is going to be the most important election in the history of our country, and we are all going to have to be involved to make sure that we elect a leader who is going to bring us together.
Hi, Representative Brownlee. I've been a resident of California for 41 years. The first 20 of those years, I never even gave a thought to wildfire.
I'm sorry, the first 20 years?
The first 20 of those years, I never even gave a thought to wildfire. It just simply wasn't something that impacted my life, and I've lived everywhere from Pomona to Glendale to Beverly Hills to Thousand Oaks to Reseda, a lot of different places. The last 20 years, I've experienced personally 4 wildfires, 3 in the last 3 years. I have long thought that a price on pollution, specifically carbon and methane pollution, was the most effective way to address climate change and global temperature rise. MIT has put together an interactive climate simulator called En-ROADS, which basically shows
at
that...
At the Aspen Institute, we played with that, and it's an extraordinary tool.
Which basically shows a fee on carbon to be the most effective single strategy, not the only one that's necessary, but the most effective single strategy. And I know that plan, HR 763, which would institute a fee on carbon and then give a dividend back to American households, has been endorsed by all of the representatives surrounding our districts: Brad Sherman, Salud Carvajal, Katie Hill, Ted Lieu. I know you have not endorsed it, and it would address the issues of corporations, companies that want a level playing field, because it would include a border tax adjustment. I'm wondering what your concerns are about the legislation, why you haven't endorsed it, and what the chances are that you someday will.
Well, the chances that I someday will, the door is, that door on that bill, I'm still very much open to it. And I know I've had several people come to my district office and Capitol, and to the Capitol, asking me to sign on to the bill. And the reality is I just haven't really had a chance to digest the entire bill. One of the concerns that I had was I was actually worried about, and this might sound silly, but I was worried about incentivizing people who were going to pollute, if that makes any sense. And so I just, Ted Deutsch, who's the author of the bill, is a good friend of mine, and we've talked a lot about it. And so I think I'm getting there. But you know, when I sign on to something, I take that pretty seriously, and so I really want to, you know, carefully vet it, and I will. I promise you that I will go back to Washington and take another look.
You mentioned cap and trade,
Yeah.
and I think that the chances for that incentivizing pollution is actually much
Yeah.
higher.
I mean, and it's true that this particular bill is a bill that rings positively for Democrats and Republicans because it is a rebate in some sense back into a person's pocket, and that's a positive thing, and that's I think a very good way to frame it, as opposed to, you know, as soon as you say the T word, you know, people freak out, and I get all of that. Yeah, I promise you I will go back and revisit it.
And if you want to, any of us want to make our thoughts known to the select committee on the climate crisis, how would be the best way to go?
I'm sorry.
If I wanted to, thank you. If I wanted to express my views on HR 763 to the select committee on the climate crisis, what would be the best way of my doing that?
Yeah, I'll give you that information, but you can certainly send that information through my office, and I will send it along. I can tell you it's already on the table, so. But you can send it through my office, or I can give you the select committee's staff information directly if you want to direct it directly to them.
I would love that.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
Okay.
We would be out of the room. You know, you'll have opportunities for Dave.
I can take your, go ahead. One quick question and then we're done. So.
Thank you.
Congresswoman. I like to say, as a supermajority in Ventura County, and the Black community is becoming a supermajority in the country, do you have some type of outreach program that you do in the district to get more, you know, African Americans involved in your town halls or in politics, period? Because we're becoming, you know, a super majority soon, and our issues are, there's a lot of issues that plague the Black community that have become ignored because of our dwindling numbers, and I guess maybe our voting bloc isn't as strong. So I'd like to know if you have an outreach program to help the 1.8% African American community in Ventura County.
I don't have a specific outreach program specifically for the African American community. Certainly something that I can think through. But we do a lot of outreach into every single community, and I know in Oxnard is where the largest concentration of that. So I've been to the churches and done other kinds of things, but I don't have a specific outreach program. So, but it's something, you know, it's a good thought, and I can think through that. So with that, I think you know, it's that we've got to give the room back or whatever, but I want to thank everybody for being here, and for all of those people who didn't get their questions answered. I can hang around for a little bit, for just a little bit, because I have another place to be later on. But you can also contact my office. We can collect the cards. You can go on my website, juliabrownlee.house.gov. You can go on my Twitter feed, my Facebook feed. You can reach out to our office specifically, both district office here locally, Capitol office back in Washington. We're easy to get in touch with. All you have to do is make the effort, and we will communicate with you. And we take a lot of pride in terms of responding to our constituents. You might not get a letter from us like the next day, but you eventually will get a letter from us, and I really monitor in my office. Every week I get a report from my staff about what's on the minds of the good folks in Ventura County, and I look at that very, very carefully, and sometimes they are specific bills, sometimes it's just it's a subject area, but I have a good sense of what is on people's minds, and so my point being is hearing from you makes that happen. I wouldn't have that data if I didn't hear from you. So keep the letters and the phone calls and everything else coming in, because I take it very seriously, and it helps me do my job better. So thank you.